Hello and welcome to the old Fliers. The Avro Anson has been a popular subject on our channel. Brian Floyd told us what it was like to fly this aircraft.
Reached a stage where I had enough experience to learn to fly an Anson. I was converted onto the Anson by Alec Whittam, and we did several circuits at Guildford, as Perth Airport was then known. And I found myself checked out to fly the Anson.
The story of how Captain Jimmy Wood's Anson was found on a farm and recovered as told here.
That was the family that owned the farm, and that was the day that it arrived on the farm. Yeah, he flew it up there, and that's Jimmy shaking the hand of the little boy that lived on the farm. That's it, and then the rot set in.
Then we spoke of Anson crashes, including one in 1940 when two Ansons had a mid-air collision sticking together. The pilot of the uppermost Anson, Leonard Fuller, actually landed the joined aircraft when he realised that he still had control. He used the controls of the top plane and the engines of the lower Anson.
Now meet Pilot Fuller, a young aviator who brought off an amazing exploit that has aroused worldwide interest and admiration. He landed those two planes together after a mid-air collision. He was flying near Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, when his bomber became locked with another in the same formation. The other three members of the crews bailed out and parachuted safely to Earth. But Fuller decided to try and land the two planes. He used the controls of the top machine and the engines of the lower. You see the result of this unparalleled feat of flying skill. The bomber's not even badly damaged. They'll fly again, and so will the hero of this unique story.
A total of 11,020 Ansons were built between the 1930s and 1952. Originally built for a coastal reconnaissance role, it found favour as a multi-engine trainer during World War II. It remained in service in the RAF until 1968, an amazing 32 years. I liken the Anson to the automotive equivalent, the Volkswagen Beetle. Both were quirky, mass-built to satisfy a need. The VW Beetle was born in 1938, the Anson in 1935. The last Anson was built in 1952, the last VW in 2003. The Beetle and the Anson had air-cooled engines. Both Beetle and Anson were of basic utilitarian design, slow and noisy. The Beetle had a barely adequate electrical system. You had to choose which two of these three services to run: windscreen wipers, radio or lights. You could run all three together and risk running down the battery. The Anson also had simple design and a basic electrical system. Owner, restorer and pilot Bill Reed gives us a look here inside his Anson, where you can appreciate the simple design.
I've had people comment that the interior of this thing's a bit like an travelling antiques roadshow. They used to carry so much air ministry equipment for their role of anti-submarine, anti-U-boat patrol that it was a phase of the war where a lot of new developments were coming along. They were having radio, although you couldn't talk on these radios, it was all Morse code. It was new technology. What they didn't have in those days was emergency locator transmitters like we have today. Their emergency locator transmitter was carried in this little cage here. You can see the carrier pigeon. Each bomber carried two carrier pigeons, and the idea was that when you're floating in your life raft in the North Sea or English Channel, you'd take your pigeon out, tie a message to its ankle and send it off home asking for help. Some 20-odd pigeons were actually awarded medals for saving lives. Other equipment in this area of the cabin, we've got the sea markers. It's aluminium powder, brightly coloured aluminium powder, which they'd throw out. The container was just made of cardboard, it would dissolve in the seawater and then leave a big mark on the sea surface. So you might have seen a downed airman, or you want to mark where a submarine periscope had been, so that you could come back over the spot and find it easily. The coloured water would obviously help you get back over the right spot. Also, there's flame floats here, which again, they were for navigation, to work out your drift. You'd throw the flame float out, get some smoke going on the surface, circle back round, fly over it, and with your tail drift sight you could work out how much wind and what direction it was coming from. The observation compasses, if you saw some enemy activity, you know, a U-boat or E-boats, you'd need to report back their bearing. And to help with that, you have these big observation compasses. And because the aircraft's basically a steel tube structure, you needed to get the compass away from the steelwork so that it would work properly. So got a compass either side here. They slide out the carriers, and then you slide them out the door. This cradle here, lean out and get your sighting and work out their bearing and exactly where they were, so you could report that back on your Morse code cue here. On the rear bulkhead here we have the oldest signal lamp. Because the aircraft was working a lot with the Royal Navy and merchant ships, the only way they could communicate with them obviously was by Morse code on the signal lamp. So they carried that, and it plugs in just over here on the shelf. Here are the starting handles for the engines. The early Cheetah 9s didn't have electric starters, they had to be hand cranked, so they carry a couple of handles for the ground crew to crank them up, and of course they needed them if they were travelling to an away base. They'd need to carry the handles with them, so they clip them back onto the door here. The crash axe, and under here is the gunner's parachute. The gun turret was just too small to be able to wear your parachute in there. You can just see you sit on this little bicycle seat here, and the gun's sort of right in your face, so there wasn't much room. So in an emergency he would have to somehow get out of the turret, clip that parachute onto his harness, and then jettison the rear door here and jump out. Hopefully he had enough height to do that. I'm told that within Coastal Command, because they rarely flew over 3,000 feet, that towards the end of all they just stopped even carrying parachutes. They figured that it was better to stick with the aircraft rather than try and bail out. Again, I don't know whether you can see here is the sextant. They carried a bubble sextant for taking sun shots or star shots, and you take the sextant out and the Astra hatch up in the next compartment opens inwards, and you could stand up there on the spar and take some shots. Would have been pretty windy, I think. There's another compass here, and moving around is the toilet and the methyl bromide fire extinguisher. We've got the access panel off one of the bomb bays open here, so you can actually see into where the 100-pound anti-submarine bombs are stored. They're quite a novel setup in that the bomb doors were just spring-loaded. The bomb would release, and the weight of it would hit the doors, spring them open, the bomb would fall away, and the doors just spring back really quickly. And saves a lot of complications with having hydraulic jacks and things to open them, as you'd need on any bigger aircraft. Up here we've got the radio operator's parachute, remembering the gunner's one's down here underneath the gun turret door. There's also an emergency exit up in the roof. There's 3 emergency exits in each compartment. So here we've got the wireless operator's position, and he would often also double as the air gunner, as you know, if they became under attack. These old radios, they were very early use of radios in Royal Air Force aircraft. They hadn't sort of had much up until the early 1930s, and we've got these 2 great big units here. One's the receiver and one's the transmitter. They couldn't talk on them, it was all just Morse code on the Morse key here. And they also had what's called a crystal monitor here, because the radios have to have these different crystals and coils put in them for each different frequency that they wanted to transmit or receive on. So it was pretty complicated, and a lot of it, as I say, was just listening for Morse or listening for nulls for navigation, and and the noise and heat of battle, it must have been extremely difficult to get much sense out of them. Over here on the right hand side of the cabin is the electrical services panel. It was the radio operator's job to look after the electrical systems on the aircraft. There wasn't actually very many electrical systems on the early Ansons, apart from the radios and the fuel and flap gauges. That was about it. They didn't have any electric starters, so there wasn't a lot to look after. In the navigator station here, they carried a lot of, specialised nav equipment and circular slide rules. This one is just for getting the right, what's a bombing computer, to get the bombing angle computer with your height and airspeed, just to know exactly when to drop your bomb. And he had his own little instrument panel here with airspeed, altitude, a stopwatch and a clock, and another little observation compass. He had the chart table here, which you could sort of open out a bit, make it bigger. Protractor here, so he can mark his course off. So important that they kept track. These aircraft were operating, several hours out to sea, out of sight of land, so they really had to keep track of every turn and every sort of variation of wind that they came across to find their way home. And of course, a lot of aircraft, coastal command aircraft, were lost, not to enemy action, but flying into hills, coming back to England in the terrible weather that they were forced to operate in. I was fortunate to find a lot of this equipment before internet trading really kicked off, because since sort of mid-2000s, everything's gone up in price so much because of the internet. You were able to sort of buy stuff at reasonable prices. I think if I had to buy it all again now, it'd cost me just about as much as it cost me for the whole aeroplane in the first place. Moving into the cockpit area now. On operations, they wouldn't have had dual controls fitted because all the RAF bombers were obviously single pilot. So this would be out, and the pedals fold up out of the way so the bomb aimer can crawl up into the nose when they're approaching the target. Over on the right hand side of the cockpit here, we've got all the bomb fusing switches, and this is for the 100-pound bombs in the centre section. And for the light carriers, you had 8 bombs in the forward compartments, and you select which ones you want to drop on this panel here. Here we have the fuel collar on and off. So here we've got the ring and bead sight for the pilot's 303 machine gun, which is mounted down here by his left knee, and he can cock the gun and clear jams from the cockpit here. Got the pressure gauge for the brakes, clock, obviously, the tachometer for the dual tachometer for the engine RPM, the pilot's blind flying panel here, the standard RAF 6-pack which all the aircraft had, PA compass, and various engine instruments, fuel gauges, temperature gauges. So because of all the glass in these things, they get terribly hot in the summer, so that they have this sun blind which you could sort of pull over the top. They'd probably have it folded back on operations because they'd obviously want to keep a lookout for any enemy aircraft, but at least on the ground it sort of gives you some relief on a hot day. So we've tried to keep the cockpit or instrument panel as original as possible. We have had to make some concessions to modern days with transponder and radio, but we've managed to hide them. Here we have the diagram of the fuel and oil system, which was always on the shelf, but we've made a little box there and we take that off when we're flying, and here we have the modern radios and electrical panel, intercom, what have you, hidden away underneath. Same with the fuel flow. We've got the bomb aimer's steering indicator here. He would push the button up front to tell the pilot to turn left or right, but we've got that hiding a modern digital fuel flow indicator because the early fuel gauges weren't that accurate.
This was one of 1,000 Ansons delivered to the RAAF. Around the world, not many Ansons survive due to deteriorating wood and glue used in its construction. Here is Bill Reed's Anson in action at Omaka Airport in New Zealand. Note the large amount of glazing. Great for pilots to see outside, but hell on a very warm day. Both the Beetle and the Anson could be called docile, never exciting, but always dependable. Thank you for watching.